on the edge of the abyss. The night was thick with fog as Hannah drove down the winding mountain road, her headlights barely piercing the dense mist. The radio had lost signal hours ago, leaving her alone with the eerie silence of the forest. She glanced at the clock on her dashboard. It was nearly midnight. She had hoped to reach her destination before dark, but the road seemed endless. As she rounded a sharp curve, the fog suddenly parted, revealing a narrow, ancient-looking bridge. It spanned a deep chasm, the bottom of which was lost in darkness. The bridge's wooden planks creaked under the weight of her car as she slowly drove across. On the other side, the fog closed in again, thicker than ever. Hannah's heart raced as she continued driving, the sense of unease growing with each passing mile. Her phone had no signal, and the GPS was useless. She was truly alone. Suddenly, her car sputtered and died, leaving her stranded in the middle of nowhere. She tried the ignition, but it refused to start. Grabbing her flashlight, she stepped out of the car, the cold night air biting at her skin. She scanned her surroundings, but the fog obscured everything beyond a few feet. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of water rushing far below. As she began walking, hoping to find help, she heard a faint, haunting melody. It was a song she couldn't quite place, but it sent shivers down her spine. She followed the sound, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. The melody grew louder, leading her to a dilapidated house at the edge of a cliff. The house looked abandoned, its windows shattered, and the door hanging off its hinges. But the music was coming from inside. Hannah hesitated, fear gnawing at her, but curiosity pushed her forward. She stepped through the doorway, the floorboards creaking under her weight. Inside, the house was even more decrepit. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. The music was clearer now, emanating from an old gramophone in the corner of the room. It was playing a haunting lullaby, the same tune repeating over and over. Hannah approached the gramophone, her heart pounding. She reached out to stop it, but before she could, the music abruptly stopped, plunging the room into silence. She turned, and there, standing in the doorway, was a shadowy figure. The figure was tall and thin, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare right through her. It raised a skeletal hand, pointing towards the back of the house. Hannah's breath caught in her throat as she followed its gaze. There, in the dim light, she saw a door slightly ajar. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open, revealing a small room with a single window overlooking the abyss. In the center of the room was a worn, leather-bound journal. She picked it up, dusting off the cover. Inside were pages filled with frantic, scribbled notes. The journal belonged to someone named Sarah, who had lived in the house many years ago. Her final entry was dated over a century ago. It spoke of strange occurrences, shadowy figures, and a chilling prophecy. On the edge of the abyss, when the fog is thick, the lost will find their way to the other side. Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. She looked up, and the shadowy figure was gone. Panic set in as she realized she was trapped in a nightmare. The fog outside grew denser, the darkness closing in. The house seemed to creak and groan, as if it were alive. Desperate to escape, she ran back to her car. To her horror, the bridge she had crossed was no longer there. Instead, a sheer drop awaited her. She was trapped, with no way out. The haunting melody began to play again, echoing through the fog. In the distance, she saw the shadowy figure once more. It was beckoning her towards the edge of the cliff. She knew she shouldn't follow, but an invisible force pulled her forward. As she reached the edge, she felt the ground give way beneath her feet. She screamed, but no sound came out. The last thing she saw was the abyss opening up to swallow her whole. Years later, locals would tell the tale of the haunted house at the edge of the abyss. They spoke of a lost traveler who vanished one foggy night, her screams echoing in the darkness. Some say they can still hear the haunting melody, playing on the wind, luring the lost to their doom.